good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Today, Stan Williams couldn't be here, so he asked me, Gary Gibson, to introduce Professor Leon Chua, who's going to give us the 6th of his lectures on Memristors, this one having to do with cellular nonlinear networks. I'm hoping that he also tells us how mathematicians catch rabbits. Professor Chua?
Thank you. Those of you who have tuned into my first lecture, you will recall that this series actually has 3 parts. We begin the second part. And in fact, from now on, you'll see that every lecture is sort of related. They're all special cases, in some sense, of cellular nonlinear networks. And so, and you would recall that there was one slide I showed early on. This is a real product, as you can see, it's on the market, just introduced early this year by Toshiba. It's a very tiny camera, but that is really amazing. You will see what it can do. And it's so small, relative to the €1 coin, that's how big it is. So we're going to learn exactly what's inside this little camera, okay? And as you recall, I demonstrated that it's so fast you can detect a bullet in flight and have sufficient time to program even another bullet to collide with it. So it's that fast, okay? And you recall that this was the picture that I've shown, bullets shooting the apple, and every of these millisecond was sort of captured in nanoseconds, okay? All right, so let's read it. How does a mathematician catch a rabbit? Because this is anybody have an idea? Well, the answer is he catches 2 and let one run away. Good. And the reason I say is because the moral is that a specific math problem can be actually harder to solve than some abstract generalization of it. And it would turn out that many of the things that I'm going to discuss today, it really looks magic, you know, and yet, if you try to prove individual one, it's actually not so easy, but I have what I call a shotgun theorem that actually will cover all of them. Unfortunately, it's a bit more mathematical that I would have time to present in this course, but I just want to let you know that there is such a theorem, and if you want to detail it, it's in my book, okay? All right, so that's why I earlier on said that, you know, that we're going to catch many hard rabbits. I mean, we catch 2, but we actually would solve all the other problems in some sense. Okay, so the CNN architecture that we're going to talk about today is similar to or motivated by the brain synaptic architecture. And this is the brain that most of you know. And I have actually a sort of a model here because we're going to cover several parts of it. Last week, we opened this up and actually went inside, you know, and I didn't want to open completely, but this may fall apart. And there you will see the hippocampus embedded inside. And it is actually the most known, well-known research area for the last 10 years. And as you recall, the research in brain started 4,000 years ago by the Egyptians, and we still nowhere near you know, how the brain works. For all the things that we know, they were mainly superficial experiences or observations. There was absolutely no theory on how to explain, unlike in physics, why this works this way, okay? And it will turn out that the CNN, as you will see today, actually will provide, in many cases, an example of how it works. Well, I would not say how it works because it doesn't necessarily mean that how the brain works. In fact, most likely it is not. But at least it will say you that there's at least one way. There's at least one way that the brain can do it. Okay, it's rather than saying that we observe the brain does this, so we step closer to what's the state of the art today. Okay, so this is a picture just of a sample of all these 10 to the 11 neurons, the same number as there are in the Milky Way, the starry Milky Way, there's that many, and with all those incredibly number of synapses that connect to each other. And we're going to just look at one of them today and go into detail. And you will recall that the real scientists that started this whole area going is Cajal and Golgi, and they both received the Nobel Prize at the same time, although they disagree on many things. But what it does is Golgi provided a special chemical stain that allows you to put in the brain, and where only a subset, nobody knows exactly why, but only a subset will be colored and stained so that you can actually see it. That's what Cajal applied, and then from then he do all kinds of drawings. That's the first time anybody knew how the brain is interconnected. Okay, the controversy is whether it's one piece or separated. Nevertheless, they both got the Nobel Prize. The right side on the right is the stain that we're talking about, and the left top is a drawing that Cajal did. Okay, so the Golgi stain is instrumental. So here's a rhyme here. The rain in Spain is mainly in the plain. Those of you who have My Fair Lady. Now we say the gain in brain is mainly in the stain. Okay, so it rhymes. And now, so what is a CNN? A CNN consists of any collection of dynamic systems. Now you can call it cells, you can call it units, you can call it agents. Just some unit. Typically they are simple, so that individually, if you take one unit, it can't do much at all. But the important thing is if they are locally active, then marvels happen, okay? And they interact normally with only neighboring cells. So you can have a whole collection, but only each one interact only with a neighbor. The neighbor could be the immediate neighbor or the two layers of neighbor or whatever you can designate. So CNN, therefore, is a very general concept here. It applies to, in fact, almost everything that we're going to talk the rest of this series. Okay, so the simplest example would be just a cube, where the red dot there is a cell. And in electronic world, those would be some circuits, some nano circuit, for example. And then, but in this case, they're all identical, although it doesn't have to be. And you pick one of them, and it interacts in the sense that you actually physically connect to the immediate neighbors, or you could have two layers of neighbor or whatever. And I call that the sphere of influence. And so in the worst case, you can say the whole box is a sphere of influence. So it's very general, in other words. But from a practical perspective, it turns out that like this Toshiba chip, it's only the immediate neighbors. And not only that, it's not three-dimensional, it's only it's two-dimensional. Okay? Or it could be any shape. For example, this would be a CNN, where its intersection is a cell, and the interaction only we say with the immediate neighbors. So it could be of any shape. Okay. Now, but like I said, the Toshiba chip and what I will be talking about today is two-dimensional, and indeed, if the sphere influence is only 3 by 3. But some of the examples that I will introduce today would be 5 by 5, okay? But that's all that we need to do throughout this course. But the real chip that's in the market now is the one with the 3 by 3 neighborhood, okay? And it could be one-dimensional, by the way, just one continuous string. This is what actually we will be talking about later on toward the end. And it could be the whole thing could be connect together so that there's no the boundary is one complete thing. Unlike this one, I will have to tell you what's the end. Okay, so we need boundary conditions, just like the others. All this you need to specify what's the end. So we need boundary conditions. Okay, now so a CNN again to summarize is defined by just two things: cells and coupling laws. And it's amazing how this captures almost everything around us, including the brain. Okay, and not only the cells and the coupling laws need not even be the same. Okay, then the only thing that you really need is always this concept of local activity because a CNN can exhibit complexity, which means you can compute, you can process information, and only if the cells or the couplings are locally active. If you have neither of these, the whole thing will be just dead like a door, a doornail. It's totally uninteresting. But make the cell locally active, or the coupling, then you can have wonderful computation going on. And that's what our brain is. That's exactly what the brain is. And depending on the context, like today we're going to be calling cellular neural networks. But later on we'll be doing nonlinear network because it has nothing to do with the brain, or even nano network. The nice thing is that they all have the same code, CNN. Okay, so we're often talking about CNN. All right, so now let's start with the two-dimensional CNN, which is the rest of this talk will be, because that's the one that we had a product on the market today. Okay, and each cell in this Toshiba chip is just an emulation, inspired by a neuron. A neuron, you can see the right-hand side is an axon, that's output. So it has an output, and only one output. The fact that output can branch out is okay, but it has really just one output. And then you have all kinds of input, and some input can be inhibitory. You recall the neurotransmitter can be inhibiting, or it can be excitatory. And this will translate into plus or minus signs in the equation. And some of this can come directly from input, like you sense, a signal or whatever, the taste, all the different senses. This could be part of the input. So there are the different kinds of inputs. Okay. Now, but how small is neuron? A cell body of a neuron can range anywhere from 4 to 100 micron. Roughly, you can place about 5 average neuronal cell bodies side by side in the width of a typical human hair, just to give you a perspective in our brain how big are the neurons. Okay, and it turned out that with the Toshiba chip, our cells are much smaller. Okay, and this is just another picture of the important thing. You have an output, you have input. Okay, and so this is one cell. One cell of that Toshiba chip is just that. And look at the equation first. It's actually described by that one single differential equation. The Xij turned out to be the voltage of a capacitor. And you look on top, in the center, there's a one farther capacitor. Everything is one here to make things simple, okay? And so X always means the capacitor voltage. And every cell has only one capacitor. That is the dynamics, okay? Then, the dx dt is equal to X minus X plus Zi. Zij is just on the left, thresholds. This is the constant. It's a battery or a current source. This emulates the 17 millivolt that we all have in our neurons when it's at rest. Okay? So that you have the ability to program any threshold that you want. And then next in line is Aij. Y is the output. So look at the output. Yij is the axon. And our axon here in the Toshiba chip is described by just that nonlinearity. So it's nonlinear in the sense that the X is the capacitor voltage, but whenever the voltage is less than 1 or plus or minus 1, the output is equal to the capacitor voltage. But if it's beyond 1, minus 1, it will be saturated to become constant at minus 1 volt if it's on the left and plus 1 volt on the right. And I color code this, by the way. Please watch the color. Blue is minus 1, red is plus 1, because that's going to be our color code in the examples. Okay? So this is the equation of one cell. Okay? And notice it's a differential equation. Therefore, to solve this, you have to provide the input, and you have to provide the initial condition, because the capacitor needs an initial condition. Okay? And then you have to provide, of course, the boundary if you look at the whole thing. But one cell is one differential equation to solve. And notice that there are additions. So if you would actually build this circuit, then the good news is that you actually don't need an adder. Unlike if you were doing a digital computer right program, you have to have an adder, and adder will take time. Here you get the adding for free because it's just Kirchhoff law. And that's one great advantage. And not only you get it for free, it's exact, okay? And so that's one great advantage of the CNN. And now you interact with the neighbor. So I had the neighbor on top would be, let's start with the neighbor on right first. With the A are those that feed back from the output of the neighbor. So if you have 8 neighbors, you will have 8 of those weighted by a coefficient AKJ. So that's a free parameter. AKJ is a parameter that weights the output of the neighbor, of the 8 neighbors. And then you look also around with the 8 neighbors on the left, each one has an input, and you weight it with B. So that's why you have equation now added Aij, Yij, and plus Bij, Uij, okay? And now, put them all together, this is what one cell in the Toshiba chip is the lower part is the cell, and then the one on the right is the feedback from the neighbors, including itself. So there is a self feedback. Itself, it also feeds back. And then there's the input. So that's why the right is called a feedback template. That's a template. They are called template because every cell is identical in the cell. So you just design one set, and then everything you just copy. So we call this a template, which feeds back from the output of every cell in the neighbor, including yourself. And then the left are called a feed forward because those are real input, okay, that you get from the neighbors or from real external input like light, sensors, whatever you're sensing. Okay. All right. So now you imagine now of course you have a lens, and it's all in the chip, by the way. So you partition that into an array, and every dot grid is a cell, a CNN cell. Okay. And now, so this is just again a summary of what you have. You have the center one. We look at the center, which is the cell. It has 8 neighbors because we only have in the Toshiba chip. You only need the first layer of neighbors. Then the left is a feedback. It's a feed forward because you take the input from all the neighbors and itself, and weight it by the coefficient B. That's one input, and then another set of input is on the right. You take the output of every neighbor, including yourself, and that's the self feedback yourself, and then put it back. So together with combined, that's what the architecture looks like for one cell and its 8 neighbors. Okay. Now, as I say, unlike this, addition is exact and free. Okay. And now, so this is to capture everything I just said. You have one differential equation for one cell. You have a threshold on the left. You have 2 templates, the A template, which weighs the output, and the B template, which weighs the input. Altogether, you have 19 numbers. And this is the truly amazing thing. With 19 numbers, you can do all kinds of interesting things, and that's the computation. It's really like magic, you know, but it's true because I have a theorem, and that's where the rubbish comes in. I call it a shotgun theorem that proves that with all the numbers I'm going to show you, it will always do what I say, okay? So only 19 numbers. The instruction for executing an elementary image processing task is expressed by only 19 real numbers. Remember, you may say it's only 19, but these are not integer. So it's a huge set of numbers, 19 real numbers, okay? And these are called cloning templates, or depending on if you're biology, you would call it a CNN gene because that's exactly what it is. Every gene would specify what protein you make. It's the same thing here, okay? All right, so this is my color code. I'm going to show you many examples in the next few minutes. -1 is always blue, +1 is red. And you have all the thing in between, and it's exactly 0 is just plain white that I didn't show, okay? And what happened is that depending on CNN, vast majority of them are going to be, once you are given the input that's stationary, it will, in say 1 nanosecond, end up in +1 or -1. So you see red and blue most of the time. But there are templates that ends up in between, and you have other things. But I'm good, because this is a differential equation. This thing evolves over time, but we're talking about 1 nanosecond, so it's very fast. But you take snapshots, and during each snapshot, you are going to see different color. That means it's evolving. Every cell is doing the same thing, okay? So you can see this is a totally different architecture to the digital computer. It is not a von Neumann computer, in other words. This is yet another picture of saying the same thing. You're in the center, you have capacitor voltage. feedback the output on your, from the output with A template, and you get the input from the left neighbor, and you put together, you have the CNN, and this is yet another one in a better perspective. You can see that the center there is a blue line that goes back itself. That is a sort of feedback. So not only that it feeds back the output of the neighbor, but it also feeds back into itself. It turned out this is very important, because this is what your learning needs. In the brain, we do this what's called back propagation, all these things. We have that features embedded. And again, the feed-forward synapse, you are the center, you look at the center, there are all those synapses coming in. That's in biology, the brain scientist people call it a convergence. Everything converges into that cell. And then divergent, you are there and you send out an action, but the action can sort of branch out, and that's called divergence. So you can see why this is really an emulation of our brain, okay? The amazing thing is that in our brain, we need for every neuron, we need about 20,000 or more synapses. Here, we only need 9. It's incredible. And it will turn out that because we can do things in nanoseconds relative to millisecond in the brain, we can actually do amazingly many things that the brain can do, okay? And when the coefficient, the feedback coefficient A is positive, we say it's excitatory, and if it's negative, we say inhibitory. Just for exactly the same reason, we have neurotransmitter like the glutamate that are excitatory, or GABA that is inhibitory. Okay, and for the same reason, you have many different neurotransmitters. We have different templates. So we have a complete analog of what the brain is doing. This is the circuit actually that is in well, not exactly, but more or less something for one cell in the Toshiba circuit. And now that we have Memristors, by the way, we can actually, Professor Kim from Korea and a student came up with a remarkable way of simplifying the same thing with much fewer circuitry, like he's now using Memristors. So Memristors from now is now coming in as on the sideline now, like we know all ion channels are Memristors, and so we don't talk about ion channels anymore because those are the elementary building blocks. So we're not going to talk much about Memristors anymore, but behind this, that makes this possible, you will see is something like the Memristors. So each set of template instructs the CNN to perform a specific task. And again, I'll remind you about this color code because I want to start showing you examples. So let's take a look at edge detection that you already have seen. By the way, our brain, one of the most elementary functions that the brain should do, and this has been theorized, nobody ever proved this, but because if you have a complicated picture or try to interpret something, there are a lot of redundancy. So what you do is you just want to see the edges and to extract the information. So we got to have edge detectors, okay? And anyway, here's an example. This is just a 5 by 5. This is here with only 5 by 5, so that big enough so that I can show you what's going on. Okay, imagine. So there are only 25 cells, and that's a template. The above, you can have a 5,000 by 5,000 CN. It's still the same template. That's the remarkable thing. But we're going to look at only one. So the input is shown in the left, and remember, if you need an initial condition because the capacitor you have to specify what is the initial condition. In this case, the initial condition is all white, all 0. So you can see that there are actually two possible. You can have two kinds of input. One is the external input, like the lady, the picture. But at the same time, you can have another input, whatever you want. Okay, but in most cases, it's just initial condition in order to make the template work properly. Okay, but in some cases, it could be another set of input. And then on right is the output. So when you turn it on at 0 times 0. Things going to start move. Within 1 nanosecond of everything converges, and you look at becomes steady state. You can see now in this example, you will see only the boundary, the edges. Okay, and now the way to understand how this works is the following. And the reason I used only 5 by 5, so you can imagine now that because it's red and blue, so you're either +1 or -1. Okay, so I can map this. I can code this as a 25 by 1 vector, okay? So on the left, you have a 5 by 5, so the vector is 25 vector, all the component would be 1. So again, but important thing to realize that's one point in the 25-dimensional space. And then at time 0, you say go, and then it evolves, and this would be a possible trajectory as it goes. And then at 1 nanosecond, everything stops. And because in the sense that it doesn't move anymore, the color stops changing in between, color change, and you read out. And you can see in this case, it's now all the ones and the bar, and the rest are -1. This is exactly how every cell works, okay? So you can see it's true dynamic going on. The remarkable thing is that this is so fast, that you can do so much thing that a digital computer cannot, okay? So this is what I call an attractor. And you can modify the input a little bit. For example, some of the red picture may be green or something as another input. As long as it is within some neighborhood, it will, as long as within this little yellow envelope, you can show that under certain condition, it will converge to the same thing. And that's why that's called an attractor, because you have a fast region and it keeps moving and it sharpens, and then it finally, the end result is when it stops, and that's called an attractor, okay? All right, so this is another view of the same thing now in time. Time 0 at the left and t1 nanosecond at the end. The left is all the 25 pixels are red. On the right, you can see only the boundary is red. In between, at some different time in between, you have these different colors. And that's showing the motion, how this thing actually evolved over time. And so every cell is doing the same thing, okay? So if you have a 1,000 by 1,000 array, every one of the cells is doing exactly the same thing, and evolve. And that's what a CNN is. It flows, so that the correct mathematical terminology is flows. It flows via nonlinear dynamics, okay? So imagine, in this case, I'd like a square tube whose walls are positively charged and hence attracting electrons speeding to the right, okay? And unlike most other cases, you cannot guarantee 100% accuracy. In this case, the CNN that I'm going to show you works correctly for all possible input patterns. You cannot, some people who didn't understand say, oh, this is cheating. This is just a lookup table. What is just program it, and then you just look up. But this is not what it is. This is all dynamics. It's all dynamic. You don't store anything. The CNN is clever enough to exactly know what it should do, okay? And I say it's 100% accurate in the sense that for the edge detector template, I can guarantee you 100%, no matter what input you give, such as this one, at the end of 1 nanosecond, you will get the edges on the right. Unlike other cases in learning, when you learn something, you can just say that all these examples so far works, but you can never prove that there won't be another example, it won't work properly, okay? In this case, it's 100% because it's a theorem. It's one of these rabbit things now that just pops up because I have a shotgun theorem, okay? All right, so the whole idea here is everything ends up at the bottom of the hill, and when you end up at the bottom here is when things stops, you're in equilibrium, and you read out, okay? But in a complicated case, you can have a very complicated landscape, and so the tricky part is that you have to know how to design pick those numbers, so that you always end up at the very bottom, the lowest minimum, because that is the correct answer, okay? But these are called attractor-based computing, okay? And another interesting thing here is, unlike in digital computing, if you want to increase, say, from 100 by 100 array to 1,000 by 1,000 array, it's a big deal because everything multiplies and ends up much more time, whereas in a CNN, the processing time, in most cases, does not increase with the size of the array. You can increase it by 100 times, 1,000 times. For the edge detector, it will still take the same time, okay? Because every cell is doing its dynamic at the same time, okay? So this 19 number is so remarkable to save space. Let's just cut it off and join it into one string, a string of 19 number, and that's what I call CNN gene, okay? So in many cases, I'll just show you the gene. That's what it means. It's just a code. So for the edge detector, either I give you these 3 boxes on top, or I just give you the yellow string. In this case, the leftmost number, watch it, is minus 0.5. That's the threshold, okay? But by just changing from minus 0.5 by adding minus 8, become 8.5, you can see the other two are the same. Suddenly, this cell would do exactly an entirely different thing. In particular, it will pick up only the corners. Look at the thing on the right. Every one of those red spots is a corner of the pattern that you have seen on the left. And it is true for any pattern that you put on the left. That's what's important. And that's why they have this shotgun theory. It proves that it will always do it correctly in 1 nanosecond. Now you can see that it's now minus 8.5. The rest is the same, okay? So this is, now here's another series. I'm giving you now a few examples. Here's a pattern on the left. And the goal of this example is to show that this cell is designed so that it will look into this pattern on the left and look at pick out any pixel that is surrounded by the blue sea, an island. Where are the islands at all? And you can see there are only 3 islands on the lower right corner. Look at the thing that looks like S. There are 3 dots there. Those are the only 3 dots that is surrounded by by the blue sea. So this template is supposed to remove that. On the right side, you can see they're removed, okay? And we always do that no matter what pattern you do. Then, see, every time you have a different set of 19 numbers. The next one, I'm going to use exactly the same example, except that in this pattern on the left, there are blue holes inside. If you think of this as an enclosure, red enclosure, those are blue are the holes. I want to fill them up. So I'm going to have a set of templates that will pick any pattern in the left that has holes and fill it up. There you are. And it's a different set of templates, and the right side is all filled up. There are no more holes in that little circular wheel, okay? Here's another template where the pattern on the left is, a set of birds flying. And the purpose of the illustration is that I can pick up whether a particular object is at a certain point in time. And that is being used now as an initial condition. On the middle pattern is I show you a dot on the left and 3 red spots. So the goal of this is to say, well, if there is anything on the left that intersects with those 3 points, pick it up. There you are on the right. You can see those 3 birds, are the only ones that intersect those points. So you begin to see that there are more intelligent being introduced now, and it will do 100% of the time, okay? And now this is a very interesting template. Erosion template is one that you pick any pattern on the left, and it will give you an output in 1 nanosecond that will peel off one layer from any part that borders with a blue sign. It will peel off 1 layer. Okay, so it becomes skinnier. You can see the left. Okay, whenever there's blue, it will peel off 1 layer. Okay, and aside, it would be nice. I call it a multi-dollar challenge. So drug company develop erosion peel to shed 1 shell uniform everywhere from our body. That's exactly what this erosion template is supposed to do, only on a pattern. Okay. Then there is, by changing the number from, you see, it's minus 5. I'm going to keep the A, B the same. I'm just going to change the threshold from minus 0.45 to plus 4.5. From this inhibitory, I'm going to make it excitatory. Plus point. Now it do the opposite thing. For every cell that borders the blue, it will grow another cell. Okay, and you can see it's the same pattern, become farther. So I call it a dilation template. Remember this because I'm going to come up with an example using these 2 templates as think of these templates now as subroutines, and you're going to be able to write a program that will call different subroutines, do different things. I'm going to show you an example where I would just use these 2 subroutines as an illustration of what you can do. Now, it turns out that even though everything is analog, you can do digital. For example, with this template on top there, you can take the input on the left, and you can take the initial condition now as the second input, and this particular template is going to become an AND operation. It will take the AND logic of that, and you can do all also, for example. Okay. Now you have seen this already last time. The famous book that now I have the real book with me now here by Minsky. and which most of you probably know is the guru in artificial intelligence, and so widely respected until he came up with this book that virtually sort of destroyed the area of artificial intelligence research funding for about 10 years by showing that it would not be possible to use a perceptron to distinguish these two patterns, whether one is one piece, one continuous red piece, fence, or two or more separate pieces. Now, with this CNN template, this 19 number, I'm going to show you. Now, this is interesting. You can say that this thing, CNN, is so too simple. It's just local, interconnect only to the first layer. How can it solve? This is a global problem. But you should remember that even though its cell is interacting only with its neighbor, but the neighbor is interacting with its next neighbor. So the whole thing is really global, as illustrated in this example. So on the left side on top, the yellow string there is just the number that you have just seen. That's the template. And with the initial condition and the second one, where it's just a notch, you take away one notch. That's the initial condition, okay? And the evolution, as shown there, ends up with something that's left over. And if you think of that dynamic as a file, you start a file from with that notch, and it starts to burn, and when it stops, the fire stops burning, all the woods are gone, you still have a part of a fence left. Therefore, that's two pieces, okay? Whereas for the same template, remember, it's not, you don't need another, it's the same template. We now use the second pattern on the bottom, okay? This is the second pattern. And now I'm going to, again, just knock out a notch here. That will be my initial condition, which can be interpreted as lighting a match, okay? And now it starts to burn. And in the end, you can see that it's all blue, so that's one piece. So I've just demonstrated that with that simple template, it can solve this unsolvable problem by the perceptron. And the way it works is more like a domino thing. One triggers the next one. It's weight. So this is an example of weight computation template. And in the first lecture, I already showed you that we have found that our brain, the Hodgkin and Huxley equation, actually has wave dynamics. We're going to come back to that toward the end of this series. So now, using my attractor sort of diagram here, you can have a 10,000 by 10,000 pixel, whatever. It's still 1 point. The important thing is, with this interpreter, that's just 1 point in a very high dimensional space, and it will evolve with that template, and in the end, it ends up with another point in a very high dimensional space, and then you decode that, and that's what you get, okay? And same thing here. So I'm just showing you now the input and the output, omitting something, the transition in between, okay? And now for the second one, it's now end up with a blue slate, okay? So this is now clear, okay? Now I'm going to, you have seen this pattern already before. With that template, 3 by 3 template, you can emulate what our brain does. If you were thinking, you were just looking at a lot of faces, that would be your initial condition with the red thing on the face. You steady state, at the end of 1 hour, you will see 2 faces. On the other hand, if the initial condition is somewhere inside, in the middle, which is emulate like a flower base, you will get that. And so this well-known phenomenon, illusion, has been widely studied by many people, and mostly as psychologists. There are all kinds of theory and explanations, but no one can actually prove that that's what is the exact mechanism. And so I'm not saying that this template is what it does, but I'm showing that there is a concrete example. You see, most of the other examples are psychological. It says this is how things would happen. But here is a real example. It says that there is at least one example that this could happen. So that's the difference here. I'm saying that we are a step beyond what the psychologists can do. Okay, here's the same thing. Most people would agree that the upper segment is shorter than the lower segment, but if you look carefully, you can see on the line of the same vertical line. So again, this is the well-known Miller-Lyer illusion. There are hundreds of explanations, but no one can prove what is exactly what's happening. Here's a template that would be full, or given that input, it will give you an output, and he would believe that the upper segment is really shorter than the lower segment. So I have an example here to show you that this could actually happen if those were the template. You can imagine a particular set of neurotransmitter concocted that would do the same thing, for example. Okay, and here's another example. Most people would believe that the lower square is actually larger than the upper square. Okay, and that's not true. If you look at the vertical horizontal encounter, you see exactly the same size. Here is a CNN template that would end up full by the same way because it shows a much bigger square on the bottom right. Okay, and there are many more templates. By the way, I'm a bit going out of time, but I'm just going to show you that there are many examples. If we have time in the discussion, we will come back. But I'm just showing you. But I want to go to the main issue now. And this is the main interesting issue here. We have most of you probably have heard of Hilbert and Wieser. And next to Husky and Huxley, Hilbert and Wieser probably are the most recognized scientists that made major contribution to understand how our brain works. And they made Nobel Prize in 1981. And the way they did this is they were trying to figure out how the visual cortex, and by the way, the visual cortex we're talking about is now in the back of the brain, somewhere here. Later on, we're going to go down here in the inferior temporal cortex. So these are the locations that we are interested today in my examples. And so they would poke a electrode. The cat, by the way, is the first experiment they did, first serious experiment was a cat. And so they have to anesthetize it so they can drive an electrode, and they would then shine different patterns, into the screen and see whether the cat is going to respond. Respond means that they will hook this up, they later on turn to monkeys. So, but it's the same setup. So it's connected to oscilloscope, so you can see they were looking for whether their action potential, it means that that particular neuron where electrode was driven is responding, or they can at the same time with this loudspeaker, so you can actually hear the click, 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 click. They call that a machine gun because it apparently sound like machine guns when this happened. And they spend many days and trying to do, because before their experiment they were always doing the standard thing that everybody else does. And in particular, they were actually more advanced laboratory in Germany and in Canada. Everybody was competing. They were all trying to figure out how the visual cortex worked. Okay, and until they did this work, everybody using a round spot. They were shining round spot of different sizes. And in fact, there's a very fancy lab in Germany headed by professor, very well-known Professor Young, that has such all automated so that you can shine lights of any spot or any dimension and any background and any way you want. It's all automated, but all end up in frustration. No matter what they do, they would end up with nothing. The cat just refused to respond, and they almost gave up. And this is a true story, One night they were working till about 1 in the morning, the evening, and they were just about to give. Both Hubert and Wieser were tired, so they were just going to turn off the light, and suddenly Hubert sort of or Wieser actually dropped the little glass thing with the spot, and so pick it up and they just put it back in the instrument and shine light, and they were just going to leave, and then all of a sudden they hear the machine gun. So they struck gold. They realized immediately that this cat is seeing something that they never saw before. And they looked around and they realized that glass was cracked. There was a straight line, and it was the straight line that is the correct stimulus, visual cortex. That was what led to the Nobel Prize. It's an accident, but they were very smart to realize that immediately. And so this is the striate cortex. This is the area that we're talking about here, right here in the back here. And then, but it's buried inside, okay? Because there's a direct line. Next week we're going to go from the retina to the cortex, and we're going to look at the same area. And this called striate cortex because the different layers, but if you unfold this, the brain each hub will be about this size, a foot by foot, 1 by 1 foot, almost exactly this size, and it's about 2 millimeters thick. And then in this particular area, they found out that, these are well known, that the cells are so, for whatever reason, arranged in layers. That's why it's called striate cortex, okay? And now the discovery they found is that if you drive an electrode vertically down, the cat will make this machine gun respond no matter where they drive down. But it turns out that only for certain direction. And for example, look, if they make the direction different, by the way, they of course went through a lot of trial and error until they realized this. That's what the Nobel Prize is for. In this particular example, only the one in the middle part with a minus 45 degree direction would the cat make this respond with many spikes. The rest, are much less, you can see, okay? So it turned out that they have discovered that there are cells, neurons, along a vertical direction. That means after you unfold it, you drive it perpendicular, that there are different columns. The terminology then is called column, where all the cells in that column will respond to one orientation. And they found out that, in fact, all orientation can be, there are neurons with all orientation. Like on top, all of them has one orientation, and they have what's called a tuning curve on the right-hand side, which means that if you deviate a little bit from the perfect orientation, the response will be less and less. It's like a bell shape. That's called a tuning curve. On the other hand, if they drive this more parallel, the other one is perpendicular, more parallel to the layer. If you spread it out and drive it along a tangential direction, they found out that it would respond to all the different directions. So the conclusion is that the striate cortex area had different columns. Each column responds to only one particular orientation of input. And that is now history. Of course, there's so much thing has been written about it. And so this is just a caricature of that. If you drive that electrode through that along, this is now tangential. You are going to be able to see that all of those directions will be responded as you keep advancing along that line. Whereas if you do it perpendicularly, only one direction will be respond. So this is another picture of the striate cortex. So the column thing, it should be perpendicular straight down. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to show you now a CNN that will do exactly the same thing. This also has been done many years ago when I had a Navy contract. So I had to pick a picture that the Navy loves, which is the Iwo Jima landing with this flag. So by the way, a lot of these templates are designed by Professor Roska from Budapest, Academy of Science of Budapest, and this wonderful group of talented students, including Zarandi and Chaba, and many more that I have time to mention. Most of the examples were developed by that group. So here's an example of with that template on top, all the cells will respond to only edges that had minus 45 degrees. So you can see that on the right side, only that flagpole that's minus 45 degrees and the few other that are slanted that way is output. Changing the template slightly, this is now for horizontal. You see, they're all horizontal direction, okay? So another template would respond, pick up only all the vertical thing. Changing again a template, you will see now all plus 45 degrees. In fact, every possible degree you want, they have developed template. So you can imagine now this is in fact almost exactly what Huber and Wisher had found, except that we had a CNN that would do exactly the same thing. And each column that they observe with different inclinations, it's a different template, okay? And so you can say that, in fact, you can say that those columns are exactly CNN. It's not a line, but it's just a column. Okay, all the cells are interacting with whatever, which nobody knows. Okay, but they are neurotransmitter interconnected. But they are going to be doing something like this. Okay, because they don't need a lot of, they don't need 20,000 synapses. There's only those within that column. Okay, so that by the way, that's exactly with this particular work by Hube and Wisser. They have proved that essentially that when we see a picture, it doesn't go to just one spot. The human brain has at least 32 groups of neurons receiving the same image from the retina. Okay, now the CNS architecture is similar to the brain synaptic architecture, as I've been stressing, and now I'm going to show you an example that this really is local operation. Here's I apologize for the animal lovers here. This is not my experiment anyway, but there's a dog that's been constrained on a treadmill. And then the experiment is that the psychologist is going to cut off the brain so that basically you can see that you have the hind leg and the spinal cord and the front leg. And then you can see now this is the part where it's cut off so that the dog is basically brain dead, okay? And yet, the dog continued to be working properly on a treadmill. This proves that this is this is a kind of CNN that really needs only local interaction. And now I'm going to show you a video of a little robot with only 6 legs that was developed at my colleague, Professor Fortuna from Catania, University of Catania. Can I see that video, please? There are 6 cells only, 6 cells, and in the back, 6 cells CNN. Each cell is controlling one leg. Okay, Professor Catania took away 1 cell, disabling, just like cutting the dog's thing. So you have only 5 cells. Still works. It's just a bit crippled. Now Professor Fortuna is going to pick up yet another one. So this poor chap has only 4 cells left. Well, you can see that it's not completely disabled. It can still work. This is the difference between the brain and the real machine. Okay, if you take any electronic device and if so much as just one transistor is disabled, the whole thing is going to stop quick, right? Well, not true for the CNN. We call that graceful degradation. It will just quit. It will just degrade, okay? And that's another difference between our brain and the real machine. You know, we degrade gracefully, okay? So now imagine that you take all of these templates that have been developed and you design some additional circuitry around each cell with some global control unit. You make this into programmable machine, and that's what the Toshiba chip is all about. I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm not going to go through it until we come back during the discussion, but I want to show you. So this is, the Toshiba machine has 25,000, 344 cells, 177 by 144, okay? So this is a set of differential equations being solved, but in real time, okay? Now, I want to show you a real example. Here, suppose you have a Picasso the picture. This is just a contrived example to illustrate. And for some reason, it's got damage on the right-hand side. It got a lot of those called pepper noise. All those black spots are pepper noise. And they also have a lot of salt noise. Those white spots, the cracks are so they got cracks, salt, and pepper noise. The goal of this exercise is to figure out how to how to repel this so that most of the salt and most of the pepper noise is going to disappear. So write a program, for example, you take one erosion, you can see that most of the salt, see, all the salt now disappear by one erosion because it becomes skinnier. A few of the black spot remains, so you make another erosion, it's completely cleaned up. But while you do that, of course, all those white crust become bigger because it gets, every layer gets, one layer gets removed and becomes cleaner. But you have already solved one problem. You got rid of the salt, the pepper noise. You now make the problem worse for the pepper, for the salt. So all you need to do is to do dilation. You begin to get bigger and close up. So after, I'm sorry. So these are two dilation. So that you're back to the original crack because you have two erosion. But you now add two more, and practically most of them has disappeared. Okay, so you have removed most of the salt pepper noise, and you have removed most of the salt noise. But then you still have a situation that this new picture is a little bit farther. The face is a bit swollen because you have two erosion, but four dilation. So to recover the original shape, you make two more erosion. And then the final one is as close as you can be to the original. Here's an example then that you just write a program. You say do two erosion, four dilation, and two erosions. Okay. Now this is an example of what this CNN machine is doing. But I want to show you now that since I have only about 4 minutes left, the last example is important because here is an experiment that has been reported published in Nature. Here's a monkey, and we're looking at the inferior temporal cortex, down the red bar below. So we're looking at somewhere way below here. This is the last stage of this image processing. This is the most advanced stage. It turned out that at that stage, the neurons there is known to recognize different shapes, and not just a line of certain shape, slope, but different shape. And so the experiment by Professor Fujita is to show this monkey, and the monkey, of course, is hooked up with electrodes in that region. So a pencil is shown, and the monkey is obviously not very interested, and there's no response. Show a book, no response. So not obviously very scholarly. And how about apple? Still no response. Monkey loves banana, so he has banana. No response, not hungry. Then he somehow get a picture of his daughter or whoever there, and then the monkey going crazy. The machine gun just came out. So they realized that something in this picture is being recognized, and maybe it's the eyes. It's prominent. So look for something that has big eyes. How about that? No response. So it's not the eyes. Okay. And maybe it's not the cat eye. Maybe, how about a monkey that flirts? Okay? A sexy monkey. Still not interested. Then they try other things. Somehow they pick a pepper and they went crazy again. So what is common in these two things? That particular neuron in that area of inferior temporal pattern is recognizing something that's common in this picture. Can anybody figure it out? It's the lips, the pattern. So Professor Roskar's group, following Professor Fujita's suggestion, worked out a program and a CM program and put it on. And so you wrote the same thing. You have a flowchart and you put in a subroutine. And the program came out. You show these two pictures. It picked up the two lips. Okay. So the morale is that the CNN, I'm skipping a lot of details about the machine because I'm out of time. I have only less than 2 minutes left. But we have the discussion that I can come back for those of you who want to. But the summary, though, here is that the CNN universal chip is just a wonderful machine that you can program it with whatever subroutines that is available or additional one that you may have to develop. And you write a program. They're simple. When you buy this Toshiba chip, it comes with all those subroutines and and operating system. I mean, the instruction how to do it. And there's a language, that you just have to learn, and then you can write your own program. That's supposed how it works. And this has been 20 years old, but it's only now that a real chip has been made commercially. So now I'm sure that this will begin to be exploited, especially by the military, because this is so fast that most consumer electronics people wouldn't be interested, or the car industry wouldn't be. It's just too fast. They wouldn't be paying the money for this. But for the military, say the firing of missiles and things like ICBM, this is exactly what you need. So I have just 20 seconds left, and so let me quickly go to the warm-up bridge, and this should be now in the in the internet, so you should just read that. And then this is the book. Everything I said here, by the way, all those templates that is proved in this book. I didn't call it the shotgun theorem in the book, but essentially I have a shotgun theorem that specializes to all the cases, or most of the cases that I've shown you today. Next lecture, we're going to talk about from limulus to sombrero, whatever that means. I guarantee you find it interesting. It's about the brain as well, except now we're going to, not starting from the back, we're going to start from the front, okay? And the final end code, is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, because until you understand why, you can see how can this happen, right? But there is a theory there. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions, Professor Chua?
It's not clear to me what exactly your theorem proves. So can you be a little bit more specific about, what are the hypotheses and,
Yeah. Well, the theorem basically says that if these 19 numbers satisfy a certain, in fact, it's really the same dynamic route that you have seen in 2 lectures ago. Remember I told you about if north go east, if south go west. It's exactly the same mathematics that led to this theorem, and it's difficult for me to explain it within the 5 minutes. But essentially, it's a theorem that allows you to take the coordinate detector and prove that with those set of 19 numbers and plug into my theorem, that it will do exactly what it says. Okay. And so that's basically what it is. So it's all about I call it shotgun rule, because it's from there you can have all this. You just plug in these numbers, and then it will give you the conclusion that I claim particular template will do. Again, it's not for all of them, but a vast majority. I have such a shotgun theorem. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. When you talk about the CNN dynamics,
Yes.
You mentioned 1 nanoseconds. So I was wondering, what do you mean by that? Is it the computation time, or how do you come up with this
1 nanosecond is just it's not a real number. Not, of course, that's not what the Toshiba chip is. I don't even know what it is, but it's very fast. 1 nanosecond is just sort of an order of magnitude that it is very fast, okay? And different chip would have its own thing, but it is, we're talking within that kind of an order of magnitude. Right. Yes.
Actually, I had a question. So you pointed out that for most problems, it didn't matter whether you had a 100 by 100 array or 1,000 by 1,000, the CNN would solve the problem in about the same amount of time.
Not all. I did say not all.
Yeah, you said not all.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if Minsky's problem, for example, is an example of one.
Yeah, that would be an exception. Minsky would be an exception, because the longer, the more time it will take. Okay, that would be. But for the corner, the edge, and all the other things would be the same. So for basically there is the class template I call the wave computation template. That class is the exception, because clearly the more bigger it is, the longer it will take.
So I guess my question is there some way of estimating in advance how long a particular problem will take to run on a particular CNN without actually running it?
Not in general, because this, in some sense, is getting into this NP complete kind of problem, you know. So not in general, but for a specific example, you could actually make an estimate, right? And you have to realize that the wave computation is not just a Minsky thing. That's just one example, but an important class of template works by propagating a kind of a wave, okay? And the reason is usually because this is simultaneous, parallel, okay? But you can have many paths, but they all process at the same time. And those are the class of what's called, we call wave computing. Professor Roscoe, I would call this wave computing for that reason.
Thank you.
By the way, I would like to mention that Professor Roscoe was a colleague of mine from the University of Budapest, had unfortunately just passed away a couple of years ago. But he is instrumental in developing this theory for many, many years. I pay tribute to him. Thank you.
Do we have other questions?
Yep. We'll take a question from the web. What tools or techniques are available to find the 19 real numbers in the CNN gene for a particular purpose?
That's a good question. There is a class, not all, again, there is a class of problems, and I cannot even tell you what class. So this is, a bit intuitive because it's a bit like learning. In fact, you can see there is no learning here. In learning, is that you don't have to have any theory. You can just take the structure and you apply learning, and then then eventually you're going to get those numbers. But what we did here is because this thing is so well understood, the dynamics, we can actually prove this analytically. If you do it by learning, you pick this number and just say, oh, it works. It's not 100%, okay? So the first thing I want to say is that we do not have a method that will guarantee every time you do it. In fact, there are problems where you cannot do it with 19 numbers. That's precisely why you need a sequence of waves, a theorem, to tell you under what class you can actually find that 19 number will do it or it will not, okay? And so it's a whole book, as you can see, so it's not possible for me to tell you everything. But what I can say is that there is no learning involved in all the examples that I've shown you here, because they were developed more well, you can say that we do the learning, the human, okay? This is the researcher, like Dr. Zarandi, made many of this discovery, had good intuition. He figured out what number he can put, and after it works, then I look at the number and I say, okay, I can prove it, okay? So that's the way this evolves, and it still continue to be evolving. Well, if there are no question, I have some 20 minutes or so, perhaps now I could go back to, let me see, I have a little numbers here. Can we go to 183? Okay, as you recall, I talked about to solve this problem, you have, first of all, you have to have the input, that's what you need for any problem. You have to input like the picture, okay? But you also have to provide an initial condition, because it's a differential equation. For every cell, you need one initial condition. And in most cases, in every template, we will tell you what initial condition you have to pick, okay? And sometimes it's not critical, but in many cases, it has actually to be within that neighborhood for the template to work properly. So that's another input. But there is a third input, and that is the cell is not infinite in size, so there is a bound. So you have to say what happened when you are in the boundary, okay? And because the cell is going to be looking for the upper neighbor, and you couldn't find it, right? So you need a boundary condition. And there are at least three different boundary conditions widely used. One's called a Dirichlet or fixed in boundary condition. And when this is the case, the chip will simply just essentially attach batteries to all the boundary cells, so that for those cells, they will also be all 0.5 volts everywhere. That would be one kind of boundary condition that's called Dirichlet. Or it could be periodic boundary condition like all around, or it could be a torus. So in that case, it's periodic, so therefore you don't need a boundary condition, okay? Like a torus, for example. And or another one is a zero flux boundary condition. This will be the kind of condition we are going to do toward the last two lectures, where it is zero flux in the sense that when it goes to the boundary, it would simply look at the invisible next layer as if it's there, but just say it's the same. It's just copy, okay? And that's mathematicians call it a zero flux. And many of those wave examples we're going to show later on has this boundary condition. So these are the boundary condition that I alluded to earlier. Okay, let me see. Let me go back to, since I do have another solve. Maybe there's some questions meanwhile that you guys, some of you have. If not, I'll backtrack and go back to some of the things that I skipped earlier. Okay. All right. So let's go back to 139. And then we can move from. Yeah. So we talk about, as I said, it's approximately 1 nanosecond based on a 0.18 micron technology. That's the time a cell would take to reach a steady state. In other words, those were technology about 10 years ago. So now today I don't know. Okay. So based on that, you can say the CNN universes can execute about 1 billion instructions in 1 second. And that's calculated also by knowing the velocity of light. You can ask what's the distance of light travel in 1 nanosecond. And that, of course, is about 0.3 meter or about 1 feet. Or we can say that a typical instruction can be implemented on a CNN chip in less than the time for light to travel 1 foot. So that's quite fast, okay? So a CNN universal chip is really a new kind of computer. And it's a brain-like computer that's based on nonlinear dynamics. You can see we don't compute a single number. It's unlike all the other machine you've seen that's digital. There's no number crunching. Everything is done by the dynamics. And the reason it's useful is because it's so fast. We're talking about an order of magnitude 1 nanosecond that makes this a useful approach. So I call this also many years ago as a supercomputer on a chip. But what do I mean by that? Okay, so let me more clarify. Again, this is a very old chip. You can see it's 2002. But even at that time, the most advanced machine then at 2002 was a IBM Cellular Computer, and it actually is made up of 32 times 32 times 64 power PC. Those of you that are older here would recall that. That was how they make the supercomputer. And if you add up all the power, that supercomputer would take 491 kilowatt. For many problems, but for certain problems like I will be mentioning later on, we have a CNN universal chip already built then, 128 by 128 CNN machine that will consume the silicon area of 1.4 square centimeter, consume 4.5 watt only, and it will do exactly the same thing for that problem. So I want to mention, I'm not saying that CNN can do everything. In fact, it cannot. But there are problems that would take only a supercomputer to solve that could be solved by CNN with a much less power and speed. So in what sense is the CNN universal chip or the Toshiba chip? In what sense that is a supercomputer? Well, it's not a supercomputer of the traditional sense, So for example, like I said, the 128 by 128 CNN universal chip, that was talking about 2003. So these slides are old, but nevertheless, it illustrates the point. I didn't have time to give you the new slides, by the way, so I apologize for that. But it gives a point here is that this is functional equivalent to the IBM Cellular supercomputer that I just mentioned. in the sense that there are currently many mission-critical problems which can only be solved in real time by using this high-end IBM supercomputer or by using CNN chip. And when I say mission-critical, I'm referring particularly to military problem, missile, those kind of things, okay? And you, by the way, you couldn't put in a supercomputer, IBM on the plane, right? But you can if the chip had been available, okay? So the CNN, even at that time, almost 20 years ago, offers already 3 orders of magnitude higher performances in speed, power, and area, okay? Now, of course, you can ask, how come people come up, how come Toshiba don't come out earlier? Well, I guess the reason is there is no demand. You know, most consumer electronic, the auto industry, they don't need this speed, okay? The people that really need speed are the military. Yeah. But then the military are very conservative. They don't want to develop one. They want to buy something that's existing. Well, that was the reason, you know. And it will continue to be the reason. I would doubt that Toshiba chip can sell many at this point because it's just too fast. And it's expensive, therefore, and so why should you pay something that you don't need, right? So therefore, in CNN is not really a competition to digital computers. It is an enabling technology for many mission-critical applications. Okay, and there are many applications, by the way, that I've mentioned that we will encounter through the rest of this lecture series. In brain science, I've just mentioned the CNN can mimic brain function. I've just shown you a couple. Then there are many more in the book, you know, that the CNN can do the same thing, and it therefore demonstrates that. And by the way, I would emphasize that I do not claim that we can explain how the brain do a particular function because no one can, you know. And all we can say is one step better. We don't say that from this experimentation we found that this particular part of the brain does this. But nobody say no why, because it's just too complicated from the molecular biology point of view. But we can say that for that particular example you showed me, I have a CNN that will do exactly the same thing. And the CNN has basically the same architecture as the brain, only it's much faster. And so at least that's what I'm claiming, okay? So in biology, for example, CNN can mimic artificial life. If we have time, I'm going to talk about the game of life later. How many of you have heard of game of life or know something about it? Well, it takes 2 templates. All you need, 2 templates. You cannot do it. We can prove that you can do it to answer the question raised earlier. If you give me a game of life and say, give me a CNN, I say, my theory says I cannot do it. But I can do it in 2 templates. And that's good enough. But because the game of life is a Turing machine, that proves that the CNN is a universal Turing machine because all you need is 2 templates, okay? In computer science, the CNN, as I said, can mimic a Turing machine by virtue of what I just said. In physics, this is really fun, exciting. Those of you who love physical phenomena, especially high energy particles, CNN can mimic exotic quantum phenomena, and I'm going to show you toward the end. It's amazing. You're going to have, for example, CP violation, priority violation, all kinds of wonderful. You can have time reversality. You can even have time travel. All these phenomena can be understood, at least with a concrete example. Even in cosmology, there's a CNN that will emulate Big Bang, antimatter, or things like that. And in social sciences, the CNN can mimic cooperation, competition, like prisoner's dilemma. So you can see that CNN is not just a Toshiba chip. Of course, for most of you here, we are interested in application in industry. That's the whole reason why Toshiba is putting that up, is to make money, right? But I'm saying that should not be the point of view for this lecture series because there are many other things that you do not need a product, but you need to be able to understand, to explain why this is possible. And many phenomena in quantum mechanics are just not sensible. You just have to swallow and say, this is what the quantum mechanics people say. Well, like I said, I have a CNN that will do that thing for you, okay? And then you can understand because the CNN has certain templates or rules, and you understand what's going on, okay? All right, now I got 9 minutes left. Let me continue. So now this is interesting. For nanoscale computing, all of you now know Intel has come and other companies have come up with all this multi-core thing. In fact, what did they do? Well, for nanoscale computers, communicating with faraway processors is very inefficient because it takes many clock cycles to implement a computing instruction. So future, this was made some years ago, so the future is now, in fact, Intel is doing it, okay? Now, nanocomputing calls for a cellular multi-core architecture where each core processor communicates only with its local neighbors, thereby enabling massively parallel computation during each clock cycle. So essentially what you're saying now with all these things, essentially they are implementing the CNN concept only in a big way, okay? So now, I can now show you some examples. Here's an example that Professor Rothschild Group came up with. They're working with hospitals, and this has to do with mammogram. Women that had to make annual examination to be sure that they don't have cancer of the breast. So there are two deadly kind of cancer. One is called has a phenomena with toward the end, if you look at the X-ray picture on top, you don't see much detail. If you're a specialist in mammogram, you can pick out those details like the one on the bottom, all those radiating things, okay? And those are called speculi. So a CNN program has been developed, for example, that takes the X-ray picture on the left, and in fact, this is the flow chart, and come up with the false color picture on the right, where the specula had been detected. So here's an example of an application. But I told you there are at least two deadly common breast cancer. This is one of them. The second one is called microcalcification. Those are the cases where there are a little bit of microparticles, and those are deadly as well. And so another program has been written using the same CNN chip. On the left side, you have the X-ray picture, and the right side is what's pick up. All those blue color places are the micro calcifications. Okay, so in other words, it can solve realistic problems. Okay, the hospital, of course, was very excited about it, but then they eventually the higher management decided they don't want to do it because afraid that they're going to be sued. Because this was not well accepted yet. Okay. And so as I already say, CNN is a for Neumann computer. It's a Theorem machine. And now for the last sort of 6 minutes, could I ask for, let me go to, 191. Okay, here's an example of what the Air Force could have done. Let's say you are flying a mission at night where there's no moon. So, but you have two possibilities. One is you can have infrared sensor, and so you see that if I pick up some kind of a outline of some warship, but you also have an intensified image identifier which is below. Neither is good enough for the pilot to realize what exactly is, but you can combine these two patterns and fuse it to get a much better situation. Like with the fusing, you can have pictures like that. Now you can much clearly see that they are real warship, and in fact, what kind of warship. And so this is a hypothetical example, by the way. But in fact, this picture were provided by Lockheed at one time. They were the who gave us this picture, and Professor Rothschild's group would develop this algorithm and write a program, and they would then show that in fact in the future all you need to do with a pilot could have, instead of looking at two inconclusive picture, if you had the CNN algorithm, he would just see a fused picture. That's an example of using CNN, because these are the things that need speed. Okay, you need high speed thing. Now the last example I want to show you is okay. As you know, North Korea now has missiles that can reach San Francisco. We know that, okay? And so the good news, of course, is that the USA has installed 9 missile interceptors at Fort Greely in Alaska, and in fact 2 now nearby, in Vandenberg Air Force Base. So that's the good news. But the bad news is it does not work. And that was 5 years ago, but 5 years, there was nothing that I've seen in the paper that tells me that they have something that's better, okay? It just doesn't work, okay? And and we're spending $18 billion a year and not getting it right, okay? So the reason it's so hard is because to shoot down a missile, there are many, first of all, it has to be extremely fast, okay? And you have to be able to identify the decoys, and all those things have to be programmed in. And so the task of, so to have the anti-missile defense, the task of shooting down a missile in space is really more difficult than hitting a bullet with another bullet. Earlier on the first slide, I said that shooting with a gun, you can shoot one with another one. But you need even much more demanding situation to do that, since such a collision takes place around 15,000 miles per hour in space. Okay, so you can understand why this, and the way to solve this problem, because they are developing lasers, high power lasers, but they are too heavy. They tried out, it doesn't work, because the laser weapon that they tried out, sitting on a 747, is just not strong enough to destroy a warhead. To really use the laser, you would need much bigger than 747. Not even the Airbus 380. So it's not a practical solution. What you need is something that is very clever and very fast. You're going to need something like the Toshiba chip, for example. And now there is a chip, perhaps the military people, as I said, they tend to be very conservative. There is now the means to develop anti-missile defense in that sense. And another example, okay, another example that this will be my last 2 minutes, I think, is ITER. Most of you probably know that this stands for International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. This has been going for the last 4 years already. Somewhere in southern France, there's an international project, billions of dollars being spent to develop fusion, because everybody believes that must be the future. So here's a picture of part of this machine. You got this man is kneading the social, give you a sense of size. And now this is a huge machine. It's very intricate, because they got, for example, just look at this, the plasma electric, the green arrow, that's just a cartoon of showing electric current. This is by part of a transformer, the secondary winding of that. But we're talking about thousand amperes, showing there. And you have to create fusion. You will have to be able to produce those kind of high energy current. At the same time, to avoid instability, there are many kinds of instability. One of them, by the way, is called Marfé, and you need a real-time visual monitoring of the plasma instability. These are all plasma. And Marfé is one of them, for example. And this radiation instability that can really lead to heart disruption and stresses, and even worse, the whole thing can explode. So a few years ago, again, this is not new, but I'm telling you that even then, this is just a baby project. They will attempt to show that you can actually use a CNN to monitor for Marfé instability. So these are the kind of thing that I mentioned earlier that I call mission critical application. These are things that are really mission critical. Money is not the issue here, of course, within reason. Okay, you have to be able to affordable, but because you're going to build only a few of them, but that's where you need machines like CNN. You need high speed, low power, and a small volume. Okay, with that, I have 3 seconds left, and so thank you very much for listening.